So the girl comes from Poland. I met her this year in Croatia at a gaming event, and I was surprised by her presentation because it's not about games, but it's about PR in video games. And she's very nervous, and I think my intro will make her even more nervous. So no pressure there. But I will not try to pronounce her name. I will let her, because it's a lot of S's and Z and K. But I will let her introduce herself. So please welcome Aga.
The clicker. Okay, before I get the clicker that I need for my presentation, first of all, thank you everybody for showing up. There's actually a lot of you guys here that I didn't expect. I'm not sure if you know, but there's another talk in other room taking place. So if you still want to leave, that's okay. Like, no? Nobody? Okay. I guess we need to go back. A lot of going back. A lot of spoilers, sorry. There you go. Okay, so my name is Agnieszka Szostak, and for the past couple of years, I was working as a PR specialist for CD Projekt Red, working on The Witcher and Cyberpunk 2077. But eventually, I decided to move on and started my own PR company called PR Outreach. And basically, right now, I try to help independent developers to build awareness about their games. Now, if there's one thing that was really surprising for me when working for CDP Red was how little actually people know about PR. And overall, different discussions I had, it turned out that not only my family or friends are not really sure what I do on a daily basis, but quite often it actually turned out that even journalists or game developers have kind of a problem of saying what it is that I actually do. And I believe that if you cannot define something, then you cannot really use it. So when talking about the topic for this talk today, I thought that we should really start with the basics. So basically, what, who, how, and with what tools. But on the other hand, I didn't want this talk to be yet another boring babble about how to write a press release and 10 most successful ways of getting it published, simply because you can all find that stuff in the internet. So instead of doing that, I kind of questioned myself, do I really know what the people I work the closest with, so the journalists, do I really know what they need and what they expect and what they think about PR? So eventually, I came up with an idea of building a simple survey with a couple of questions that I send out to my media friends out there, and I asked for their honest opinions. And more than 100 of them from all over the world, representing all kinds of media, came back to me and were kind enough to provide their feedback. And this is what my talk is based on. So basically, replies from journalists I got overall. Now, before we jump into those answers, let's start with what is PR. And since I believe a picture is worth 1,000 words, I decided to place some pictures here. Just as a disclaimer, please forgive me the low quality of them. Now, regarding what is PR, this is pretty much what my friends think I do. So they consider me just partying all the time. This is one of the industry events, and basically me and my colleague doing like air guitar. So to my friends, I only party, and this is all what PR is all about. But if you ask my parents what they think, you know, how my job looks like, well, to them, it's all about traveling to cool places. So I, as a PR person, have a chance to visit all the cool places, and this is the large part of my job. Well then, what I think I do, how I like to see myself. Now, this picture needs a little bit of a background. This is actually me sitting at the reception desk at Gamescom, representing The Witcher. And I had a screen above my head, and there was a Witcher trailer going on. And a part of it was a quote that said, "Stand along among the mighty forces." So this is the way how I look at myself, standing along the mighty forces, being the developer and media guys. Now, what community thinks I do? Yet again, a little background needed. A little bit while ago, there was a Witcher 3 leak, and I was the bad girl that had to shut down all the links in the internet where the gameplay footage was shown. And actually, this is probably something I'm really proud of, that I managed to build such a strong relationship with community that they supported me with shutting those links down instead of spreading the news. And also what they prepared for me was this silly meme, basically. So they made a Witcher out of me. And there was also like a CG trailer for The Witcher, and the part of it was a soldier, really scared, asking The Witcher, what are you doing? And the answer was, killing monsters. So the community prepared a meme saying, what are you doing? Killing leakers. And that was basically the way they look at me. Now, what the journalists think I do. That's a pretty dark picture, but I hope it's going to be visible. Yeah, well, basically what you see or don't really see, on the floor there's a huge pile of green glass, which is nothing else than just beer bottles. And basically this is Sony official party at Gamescom. So journalists pretty much think that I drink all the time and getting wasted all the time. And this is what PR is all about. But at the end of the day, what I really do, and I don't want to disappoint you guys at this point, there's no glamour, there's no traveling, no parties. It's just dirty, hard work, and this is pretty much how I end up. That's Gamescom again, The Witcher booth backstage when we were giving out like thousands of t-shirts, and I basically was so exhausted that I fall asleep in one of the cardboards at the backstage of the event. So this is how you end up doing PR for large companies. Now, when we already know what PR is, one of the most important questions you guys will have to answer yourself when starting your PR campaign will be who's the one to lead the campaign for you. And there are three basic choices you can pick up from. You can either go with a big PR campaign, or you can go with a smaller agency, or obviously you can represent yourself. Now, each of those has its pros and cons, so let's start with the bright side of having a big PR agency representing you. Now, of course, these guys usually have and can guarantee you like a pretty big media outreach, simply because they've been there for a while. They have well-established network of contacts to media. They have like insane number of emails to them and phone numbers. So they can get you covered, basically, this way or another, but they can get you covered. They also can provide you with some really excellent reporting data about how the well-is campaign doing, how the well-is your game is doing in terms of PR. And this is something really useful, but the tools that provide that are really expensive. So that's why big PR agencies usually use them. And also, usually you're going to get like an account manager, so basically a dedicated person assigned to specifically lead your project, which is like a really good thing. But like with anything in life, you also had the bad side of things, and obviously one of those is cost. Now, these guys are not cheap. They're big, they're good, they know about it, so quite often their price is out of reach for independent developers. Now, you also should be prepared for a complete lack of personal approach. Why? Because they have a lot of customers that they represent, and they are professional, of course, but don't expect them to get engaged too much or to be very personal about your project. To them, you're just another customer. And this is actually my favorite one. So you should be worried that even though the company is going to promise to you that our best specialist in the house is going to take care of your game and your campaign, this is not only true. And this is not always true, sorry. And here's the case study for you. When I was doing PR for The Witcher, we went to Germany for Gamescom, and we decided to hire a PR agency for a couple of weeks just to support us with doing PR during Gamescom time. And this is exactly what they told us. Now look, The Witcher is a AAA title, like a huge hit, very expected game. So we're going to assign our best specialist that works within our company to take care of the game. And of course, we were pleased. And then a guy showed up, and he was nice, he worked hard, he was very into it, and he was helping me out. But still, I had kind of like a gut feeling that there's something wrong a little bit. So eventually, we ended up at the party, and after a couple of drinks, the guy told me that, you know what, I'm not really a PR person. Actually, I'm a game designer. And I joined the company like 3 months ago because I just wanted to establish like a network basically within the industry and eventually, you know, end up working for some studio. And then actually he applied for a job at CDP Red and asked me to help him to get the said position. So he was in no way the best specialist the company had. Now think about it. If stuff like that happens to pretty well-known, well-established big studios like CDP Red, who you're going to get as an independent developer if you approach a big PR company saying that I want my game being promoted. Now, this is the first time journalists step in to provide an answer to one of pretty important questions. So basically, what annoys them most when they get in touch with PR representatives? And the answers provided, as you can see, is that over 60% of them said that either lag in replying or no reply at all is something that really pisses them off. And this is really important. Why? Because I already told you that big PR agencies have a lot of customers, and they usually work on highly expected AAA titles. What does it mean? Well, that means that media inquire about those titles a lot. And what do I mean by a lot? When I was working on a Witcher, and it was like a cold time, not much really happening in terms of PR, I was getting around 300 emails a day. Now, this is a cold time. Then when things get a little bit more busy, this number grew to 800. And when the campaign was fully on, and that was like the final lap for it, I ended up getting like 2,000 emails. Now think about it. It's 2,000 emails a day per one title. And imagine where in this huge pile of emails ends up the one message that inquires about your cool yet indie game, and how much chances it has that the PR agency is going to pick up it like, on time and not miss the email. So that's the big threat you have to be aware of. So the big PR agency might not be the perfect choice for you, so how about the smaller guys? Well, they are obviously cheaper. They also tend to engage more. And they're way more flexible in terms of like anything, planning for you, coming up with great ideas, budget, whatever. Big agencies, quite often, what they do is like they come up with a couple of different PR strategies for one client. And then the client has 4 to choose from, he chooses one, and they are left with 3 that they haven't used before. So when you come to them, they're gonna most likely try to sell you one of those plans that they already developed, because they already spent time working on it. Smaller guys will be more likely to prepare something specifically for you. But of course, there's also the dark side. So one person is responsible for a lot of projects. Don't expect to have like one person being assigned to promote your game. They either have none or very little reporting data, simply because they cannot really afford it. And also, they have very limited possibilities of giving you guys like the best spot in terms of advertising. Big guys, they usually negotiate at rates, and they usually have discounts. Smaller guys cannot really afford it. So for independent development studios, it might actually turn out that it's the best to represent yourself and to do PR for yourself. Now, the obvious pros you have here, there is no additional cost involved. You're already doing the job. You will be just doing more of it. Then, of course, since your game is your child, then you are fully dedicated to the project. And you have a full control of it. So there is no risk of any kind of miscommunication or delay. You know exactly what you want to achieve, or you should be knowing. You know where you want to go. You're trying to figure out how to make it. But basically, you're leading the whole thing. And actually, the next answer journalists provided will be something that even proves the point even more. Because the next thing I asked was, who do they prefer to talk to when they, meet up with the developer at E3 or Gamescom? And there are business people, there are managers, and there are developers, there are PR guys. So who do they prefer to talk to? And at this really point, you can think that the first answer is really obvious, that they prefer to talk to you guys. Well, it wasn't that obvious a couple of years back. Actually, it changed massively, because a couple of years back, it was pretty normal for both journalists and for us that we talked to each other. So us PR reps were the spokesperson for the studio. We were doing the interviews. Journalists knew that they're gonna talk to us. While these days, you have to remember that you guys are your game's most sexy asset. So don't be afraid to do interviews. I quite often talk to independent studios, and they say like, I don't really feel that confident, and I'm a little bit scared. I don't know how to do a good interview. And my English is not perfect, my accent is not perfect. Nobody cares. A professional journalist is interested in your game and in your studio, and he's going to polish the interview before posting it. So as long as you can communicate good enough to get the message across, you should totally use every opportunity you possibly have to talk about your game. And every interview opportunity, every meeting, every hands-on, every meetup like this one, whatever, just to talk with people about your game. Now, until that point, you may think that, okay, so representing yourself is a perfect solution, right? Because there are no cons. Well, there are some, and basically you can sum them up with like a lack of everything. Usually you have no time to do it because you have to develop the game. You have either very little or non-media contacts, at least at the beginning, and also at least at the beginning, you usually know like very little about PR. So where do I start? What do I do? How do I get this thing done? But you can think to yourself that, okay, I mean, I can find time, and I can educate myself, I can learn. And regarding PR knowledge, you know, Google, it's everything there. About media contacts, well, come on, you can even buy them. You can buy like whole lists of emails to journalists on the internet. So what's the problem? Maybe, actually, we were bullshitting to you guys for years, telling you that you need us. Well, in fact, you don't. Maybe you should lay off all your PR guys and just do the whole thing yourself. Well, the thing is that if you look at the next answer, you're going to know why actually you do need us. And the question was about when do the journalists expect to get an answer when they approach you about anything? Interview opportunity, assets, information about a game. As you can see, most of them expect to be kind of served within 24 hours. Now think about it. You usually work in small teams, and you have to develop the game. You have to think about the product. You have to think about the pricing. You have to think about marketing. And on top of that, you have to be ready to provide PR for like basically 24/7. So to do your emails and to be on your phone. And also you have to take into consideration stuff like time zone changes. So you end your working day, and that's great. But you as journalists just started it, and they're going to keep on asking about whatever you're working on. So this is exactly why you need a PR guy who's going to do this part of the job for you. And something that is really very strongly connected to that, and I consider being the biggest part of my job and the most important, is actually building a solid media relationship, which we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. Now, since you know what and since you know who, it's time to talk how. So basically, there's a good reference to developing a game. You know that to develop a game, basically you have milestones that usually don't change. So you have vertical slice, you have alpha, you have beta, you have gold master. Well, pretty much with quite a lot of PR campaigns, at some point you're going to have to announce your game, obviously. Then usually preview code send out happens, review code send down happens, and release. Of course, there's a whole lot of stuff going in between, but these are like the most important things that happen in the process. And the thing related to that is the famous or infamous embargoes. So basically, kind of a deadline that you set up for journalists telling that until this and this point, you cannot really publish anything about my game. So I asked the journalists what really they think about embargoes. And it turned out that for almost 70% of them, it was not a problem, which is kind of surprising because when you talk to them like face to face and when you talk to other PR reps, everybody's going to tell you that embargoes suck and nobody really likes them. They are there, so okay, but you know, everybody would prefer if they're gone. While in fact, they kind of get used to it, which is good news for you guys because this is an excellent tool for you to use and you shouldn't be afraid to use it whenever you think it's going to do a good thing for your PR campaign. Just always remember to be like very open about it, that there is an embargo and that embargo is until that day, that time, and a time zone. Because, you know, 12 p.m. in Bucharest is very different than 12 p.m. in LA. And if you're going to get your message earlier in one part of the world and later in the other, you can get yourself in some serious troubles, really. Now, when you already know what will be like the milestones for your campaign, you also need to plan the assets. So basically, the toys you're going to get, your PR representative, and the journalist to cover your story. We all know that we don't like to read like block of text. None of us do. So we need to give the journalist something to support the written text. And when you look at the list, this is something that over the years I'd say is like a efficient media kit for the journalists. Why? Because the common PR rule is like the assets should be diverse. There should be something for everybody. So you should be able to provide something in one package for print, online, vloggers, people who do live streamings on Twitch. And this is actually difficult because not only small studios struggle with providing like enough of assets and in a good quality, but big studios have exactly the same problem as well. So the next thing I asked the journalist was, what is in fact that they really need to cover the story? And first two answers that you look at them might look pretty obvious. I mean, anybody can tell that, yeah, they're probably going to go with screenshots and videos. Then, as you can see, they're not really interested in the rest until the last one shows up. And this was actually, again, a pretty surprising thing for me, because fact sheet, I mean, you know, it's a piece of paper with some sort of details about a game, basically. It's a document. So I always considered that, okay, this is something you have to prepare, but no one really cares. Media kind of, you know, they don't read it, they consider it another marketing babble, and basically it's no use. But as you can see, that's the third on the list. And yet again, this is amazing for you guys because this is your propaganda too. In this fact sheet, which shouldn't be longer than a page or 2 pages tops, you should put like every piece of information about your game that you think the journalist should be aware of. So starting from the basics, like who's the developer, who's the publisher, what's the title, what's the genre, what's the setting, on what platforms is the game going to be going, a paragraph about the story, a paragraph about gameplay, main features, you know, a paragraph about the studio, so who you guys are, and finally contact details to the person who's assigned to talk to media. You can also put there like really anything you want, but you have to be really careful about the wording, about the messaging. You have to be really consistent throughout your whole campaign. So whatever you put in that thing, you have to remember it's going to be out there like forever whenever you give it out to journalists. So then you cannot switch because journalists are going to say, you don't really know what you're working on because at some point you said this is going to be this and now you're completely changing. So you have to be consistent in your messaging. Now one tip regarding the fact sheet, as long as you guys don't plan to give it out to journalists as a printed copy, don't prepare it in PDF format because copy-paste is every journalist's best friend. So just make their life easier and prepare those in Word, basically. Now, this is something that probably the Witcher team should kill me if they knew the answer to that one, regarding how many assets actually are needed. Yet again, a common PR knowledge. Every PR rep for a large studio or every media that I used to talk to at the time I was promoting The Witcher, they're going to go with like, you know what, 10 screenshots, 10, 12, 15 different assets. Without it, I'm unable to do the story. So I was pushing for it hard, and the Witcher team hated me for that because they had the game to make and I was pushing for give me something so I could sell and pitch the game to media. While when you ask them anonymously, all of a sudden it turns out that you only need 1/3 of it. So 3 screenshots are fine, 5 screenshots are okay, which is good for you guys because especially independent studios keep struggling with preparing assets. So from your point of view, the less the better. And also think connected to that, how much time do you need to prepare the story? So how much time earlier media should get the assets? Now yet again, I was usually told 2 weeks, 2 weeks sharp. We cannot go below that. And that's a struggle because 2 weeks, that's, you know, way ahead of when the story is happening and everybody's usually working on the assets till the very last moment. When I asked them for their honest opinion, it actually turned out that 2-3 days is enough, which yet again is excellent. You just have to keep in mind that 2 weeks stays true for printed stories, mostly because of print deadlines. So, you know, with videos, online, 2-3 days is perfect. With print, you have to go with those 2 weeks. Another thing, another big myth in the industry, so famous exclusives. Now, one thing to start it, if you are talking to a journalist, don't you ever ask, hey, do you need anything for exclusive? Because the only answer you're going to get will be yes. And they even might tell you that if we got nothing for exclusive, the story won't happen. While in fact, it's not entirely the truth, because almost 70% just consider exclusive a nice add-on, but it's not something that, you know, something that the story depends on. Of course, there are situations where media will tell you like very openly and very specifically that, look, okay, we're gonna do this for you guys, we're gonna cover the game, but we need the content that only we get. And then what do you do in such a situation? Normally, you struggle to prepare assets, like we already said. So eventually, you're going to end up in a situation when you've been working on a video for a couple of weeks, and you know it's kick-ass, it's going to win the market, but you only have one video. And obviously, you want as many media and as many clicks and as many views as possible. So usually what independent studios end up doing, they pick up one of the leading media outlets, they pitch the video to them, and eventually they're going to get it covered and featured on a main spot, and they're going to get roughly, I don't know, 100K views. And for an independent studio, that's a lot, so they consider it a success. While try to think a little bit outside of the box and come with a different approach. Try to think what is like the feature or a specific thing about the media. For example, I used to do something that was called semi-exclusive. So I stopped offering like totally exclusive stuff to one outlet only. What I did, I checked, what are media kind of doing on their websites and in their magazines. And for example, if you go with IGN, IGN loves to go behind the scenes. They love to have a feature about Easter eggs, about what's hidden in the video. And this is great. Provide them with the video and with the list of stuff that's hidden there. They're going to do another story about it. Then you have GameSpot, who doesn't care about that part, but they're all about exclusive screenshots. So give them the video and like 3-5 screenshots nobody else has. With Polygon or Machinima, they prefer to talk to devs directly. So yet again, you give them a video and an exclusive interview with the game director. And by doing that, you're going to end up having a video being featured for, let's say, 3-5, the biggest outlets out there. And instead of getting 100K views, you're going to get 500K views. And that's something you should consider a success. Now, a pretty important part, so pitching a story to media. How do you sell your game to them? How do you make them write about your game? First rule, do your homework. So before you even start thinking about sending out your first press release that, hey, we are whatever studio and this is our new game we're working on, try to check what media cover games similar to yours. And specifically try to check who is writing about those games. Why? Because I'm sure we have in the room here people who play Call of Duty, people who are more into RPGs, and people who prefer strategies. And the same rule goes for journalists. You're going to have people who are specializing in covering casual games, people who are covering games, I don't know, racing games, and people who are going to cover the games like yours, maybe puzzler, platformer, whatever. So it's not only about finding media that write about your game, but also people within the media that write about the game. And then prepare a list. Once you have a list, start building a relationship. And this is, that I said a couple of minutes ago, one of the probably most important things in my job. How do you do it? Well, once you have the list, send a personalized email saying, hi, my name is, and I work for, and we are currently working on. Make it short, straight to the point. Ask them if they're okay, getting once in a while an update about your game. And don't expect them to answer, because they have no time for that. But they're gonna remember that email, and they're gonna appreciate that you took the effort to actually be a little bit more personal with them and tell them who you are first. Another great thing to do is offer help before you start asking for something. Look, we all like when people are interested in what we do, and so journalists are. So browse through the website, find the articles, comment on them, and don't comment in a style, good job, dude, that's well written, because this doesn't bring kind of feedback. Try to be more creative. So if you agree with something, say, okay, so you've got a couple of great points. What I could add to the list is this and this and that. Or if you don't agree, that's okay as well. Just be polite, professional, and say, look, I don't really agree because the way I see things is this and this and that. If you have your company blog and you were currently or lately covering something that the media did a story about, tell them about it. It's like, I like your story, and actually, you know what? We've been writing about this on our blog. Give them the link to your blog. So this way, you're going to kind of make them go to your website and check you guys out before you send your first press release. And the thing that should happen after you send it, you should follow up. But about follow-up, we're going to talk in a second. Because when it comes to press releases, I'm pretty sure we all heard cliches saying that, first, this is like a very old school PR marketing tool. This is boring, nobody reads it, it's spam, and everybody's ignoring it, and maybe we should just all, take our efforts somewhere else and just stop sending out this stuff. Well then, why almost 100 of journalists consider press releases useful? Is it old school? Hell yes, but you should still do it simply because it works. Now, this is the question I always wanted to ask the journalists. So actually, how many press releases a day they get? Because I usually heard, oh, a lot of them, like tons of them. And I get the spam all the time. So, but how much is a lot? And actually, it turned out that it's less than I thought. It's between 10 and 30. But this number is still pretty big for you guys to think well about your press release. Why? Because journalists are going to open their mailbox and they're going to just go through subject titles. So you have to cut their attention like right away. Just remember that even though your topic of your press release should be interesting, you cannot really lie. So don't promise them in the topic of the press release something they won't find inside. So sure, you can do a topic like girls and boobs inside, and probably everybody going to click. And then you're going to get everybody pissed off because they didn't find what they were looking for. So with myself, I like to be pretty straight to the point. So if I have a game that it's out and I have review codes to give to those guys, this is what I put in a subject in a press release. The game, this and this, released, and review codes. Because journalists loves hands-on. So they're going to read the press release for sure. The rest of the information, try to write them like in the very first paragraph, because most of these guys won't read beyond that point. And about the follow-up thing, this is actually, I guess, one point where there's a bad news for you guys. Why? Because when you send out a press release, most of the journalists said that the reasonable time to follow up was within 3 to 5 days. Why is it a bad news? Think that you are running a pre-order campaign. You want everybody to cover the news like right now. Or you're running a Kickstarter, crowdfunding, Indiegogo campaign. 5 working days, it's a whole week. That's 1/4 of your campaign. So you have to be like really careful with following up in terms of how to do it to make it happen, but how to not make media being pissed off with you doing that. And last one thing to close the whole presentation. This is something I'm being very often asked from indie developers. So, I'm stressing out when the journalists are asking me questions I cannot really answer. So what do I do then? Well, I can tell you what not to do. Never ever use the infamous no comment phrase. Think about the politics you watch and then the scandal that's all around them and journalists jumping on them asking for comment and the politic being like, no comment. How do you kind of relate to that? It's rude, it's basically totally impolite, and you're going to go like, well, that sucked. And journalists think exactly the same way. So if you cannot answer, tell them you cannot answer. Even better, put a context, so tell them why. It's too early in the process? Great, tell them that. You're an artist and they're talking about an engine? Ask your engine programmers, tell them you're going to go back with answers. They're going to appreciate that because honesty is always appreciated. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, so let's go for a couple of questions for Aga.
If there are none, that's okay. We can just go for a coffee.
Jason has one.
Just if you can comment on the timing. I mean, often developers will wait until the very end and then realize, oh crap, we have to go build some community and get some press.
That's a very good question. Of course, it depends on what kind of game you're developing. Because you don't create or you don't build hype for a mobile game, for example. So I get a lot of questions of mobile developers. Okay, so I have this app. How do I make it successful? Well, if I knew the formula for it, I'd be a billionaire by now, because there's no easy answer to that. So it's different with PC, it's different with mobile, it's different with console game. My advice would be start as early as possible, simply to get out there, build community, and start messaging about your game. Like AAA titles, they tend to start earlier and earlier. Sometimes, you get the announcement 3 years before the game is released. With indie titles, it's pretty different. That really depends when you are ready. So first prepare all the assets. Make sure that the game is already working. You really have something to talk to media. Within this, it's usually around half a year till 3 months before the release, when you really have something in hand to talk to media. Anybody else?
1 second, we get a microphone.
Hi, I'm Raluca. I'm from Fresh Creative.
Hello.
And I would like to ask you how important is social media when building a brand and in PR relationships?
To do what? Excuse me, I didn't get you.
When building a brand, how important is social media? You told us about press releases and journalists.
Okay. Yeah, a very excellent question. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to be badly understand with the people that might be taking care of social media here, so like social media community managers. But I really do think that at this point it's totally overrated. I mean, I can tell you myself that there's not one single company website on Facebook that I follow. I remove them all. Because whatever happens within my network, I'm going to learn about it anyway because my friend's going to post about it. And I don't want to see ads. I don't want to see contests. I don't want to see whatever the company is trying to sell to me. Social media right now, it's so crowded that you have to remember that, if you only use Facebook or Twitter, Google+, YouTube, it won't magically make your game sell. This is a part of your PR campaign, an important one, very important one to build a community, obviously, something that works really well, especially if you're looking for crowdfunding. But you cannot rely the whole campaign on it just because you have, let's say, no money to do anything else. So I really would say that these days it's actually less important than it used to be because the whole boom, grew so badly and so much, and there are so many companies out there doing this stuff that there are more and more people like myself just basically ignoring it. So for engaging your community, that's perfect, but you cannot rely only on that to build a PR campaign.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so anyone? One last question?
I think we're done.
Okay, thank you, Aga.
Thank you very much.